Hello, weary travelers. I am Adam Reason, your voice in the void, guiding you beyond the threshold into the strange sanctuary of Psycho Adam Reads, a place where reality fractures, darkness whispers, and nightmares reign eternal. If an unsettling story haunts your thoughts, share it in the comments below. Subscribe to join our Twilight Assembly. Ignite the like button to fend off lurking horrors. And ring the notification bell, lest the shadows catch you unaware. Once a week, we venture forth, a deeply immersive terror every Monday at 8 p.m. Now, lower your guard, surrender your disbelief, and step boldly into Psycho Adam Reads, the endless underground mall. If you happen upon this account, you are likely feeling bewildered. I can relate. I was in that exact same position not too long ago. I intend to explain everything, but it's best if I begin at the very start. Only by doing so will any of this make any sense, and possibly, just possibly, you might find my story believable. It began with the security position. Think of all the prestige and excitement such a role entails, working security. A dream come true. One would assume the overnight hours would be the most challenging, patrolling empty hallways with the thought of deterring late-night mischief. However, those shifts were surprisingly bearable. It was the daytime hours that were the real ordeal. Children running rampant, mobile devices out to record everything, and the constant cleanup of spills. At times, the uniform felt more like that of a custodian. Perhaps it was. So, given a choice, I preferred the quiet of the night shifts, and I volunteered for them whenever possible. The stillness of deserted shops in the darkness did possess an unsettling quality, but after a while it became serene. I'd pass the time listening to audiobooks and making my rounds. There were never any actual attempts at unauthorized entry, which made sense. What was there to gain? The one incident I remember involved a group of adolescents looking for a place to spend the night. They were in the food court at the play structure, and I located them hiding in the slide. They were hardly stealthy, easily heard. I surprised them, and their parents were far more intimidating. Those were simpler times. Things went wrong with the sublevel. I might have painted a romantic picture, but after the initial novelty wore off, the nights became monotonous. So I started exploring. Initially, it was harmless, just peeking into kiosks in the central areas, examining what was on display. It would have been simple to take items, and perhaps some held value, but I resisted temptation. Once I'd seen what each of the mall kiosk stalls offered, there was little left to discover during those night shifts that I hadn't seen during the day, just corridors and locked shops. I began trying the handles of any door I could find, and behind them were empty supply rooms, storage areas, staff-only restrooms. And then I found the access to the lower level. The entrance was somewhat hidden, which explains why it took so long to stumble upon it. It was located in a forgotten section between a fashion retailer, popular, you would know the name, and a business that had been vacant for some time. Normally, I'd glance down the hallway and move on. But on one particularly dull night, I decided to investigate the empty shop. Tucked away at the rear, amongst some aging display figures, was a door. Solid metal, painted a faded light yellow. My set of keys on my belt was extensive, so I tried each one until I found one that worked. It was a key I had not used before. Instead of a storage room bare of supplies, I found a flight of concrete stairs. No illumination lit the stairwell, and the steps descended into complete darkness. The building did have a basement for utilities. At first, I thought this faded yellow door was simply an alternative access, but the length of the stairs going down was unusual, as was the lack of lighting. Given the location and the long closed storefront, it was likely unused for years. My flashlight beam went down, and the stairs seemed to vanish into the abyss. Was there an extensive basement to the structure all this time that I didn't know about? For what purpose? Storage that was never used? I decided that it was likely abandoned. Then I retreated. The unending darkness was unnerving, and I had to continue my rounds. The display figures startled me as I turned around. They were still, but I had forgotten they were there, standing as if guarding the entrance. I locked the doors and decided to return at another time. Then I finished my shift and went home. My residence was a modest apartment. Nothing lavish, but it was my own. I cherished it and kept it tidy. Oh, I long for those days. To spend one more night there in my own bed. That night, however, my mind was consumed by the stairwell, staring into the deep shadows with no understanding of what lay below. It felt impenetrable. I realized then that I needed to go down those stairs and see for myself. The next night, I went directly to the door, bypassing my usual security checks of the mall. I expected it to be gone, or the display figures repositioned, or something like that. But it was there, and the figures were motionless. I opened the door, the hinges making a soft sound, revealing the black opening. I used one of the mannequin arms to prop the door open in case it locked. Then I started down. It felt as though the staircase would never end. My flashlight should have shown the bottom, but the beam only ended in darkness. I proceeded down slowly, breathing softly but intensely. There were no rails, and a fall here would be dangerous. I counted 50 steps. That seemed to be more than a single level. How far down did this descend? And what would I find at the bottom? The stairwell had a gentle curve, drifting slightly to the left. At 100 steps, the entrance above became a sliver of light. By 200, it was gone, out of sight. Just me, the stairs, and darkness. The air was heavy, still, and unpleasant. Minutes went by without change as I marched down. The stairs and walls were identical, smooth concrete. No markings, nothing. I marched on. Time passed. I contemplated returning, as I had been walking for a while. No, that's not accurate to say. I didn't contemplate. I knew I should turn back. It was risky, after all. A fall here could be fatal, and the unknown was unsettling. This stairwell was far deeper than made sense. Yet, I continued. I had to know what was hidden below. Finally, a level area came into view. I hurried down the final steps, curious as to the purpose. The area was identical to the stairwell, smooth, bare concrete. There was not a speck of dirt or debris. The walls and ceiling were plain. On one side was a set of doors, like those of an elevator, with a single control. It had to go up, as that would make the most sense. But why the long stairs in the first place? Putting that thought aside and wanting to return to the surface, I pressed the button. Unexpectedly, it lit up. A tone indicated the lift was present, but the doors did not open. Then I noticed a keyhole below the button. I used the same key as before, and to my surprise, the doors opened. Inside, the elevator was illuminated. A welcome development. It was old, not like a mine lift, but more like a classic hotel elevator. I entered hesitantly. The controls inside required a key to operate. I know it might seem foolish, but I just wanted to leave, so I used the key and pressed the up button. Nothing happened. I pressed it multiple times. Then it dawned on me. This was the top level. The elevator only went down. I ran back up the stairs, abandoning all caution. Further down, it was incredibly deep. Perhaps it was an old bomb shelter or something. That made sense. That's what it had to be. The odd stairs, the distance. It had to be an old bomb shelter. The climb was exhausting. My legs ached, and I developed a cramp. It took a long time, but I reached the top, where the figure still stood, stopping me from being trapped. I moved the mannequin arm and thanked it, then locked the door behind me. I decided it was not worth the trouble. It was also hazardous. I was fortunate the lift had not failed while I was inside. There was something eerily wrong about that place. It was not intended for casual visitors. Now, we'll return to our story in just a moment. But first, my wanderers, a brief interlude. If this journey speaks to your soul, subscribe to ensure your safe return passage. Strike the like button to mark your presence in the darkness. And activate the notification bell so you're always prepared when Psycho Adam Reads beckons again. Now, take a breath, steady your nerves, and let's delve deeper still into Psycho Adam Reads. I went home and tried to forget. I planned never to return. But if that were true, this account would not exist. And you would not be reading it. I kept my word for a time, but thoughts of that place lingered. For 3 months I continued my job. I worked more daytime hours, partly to avoid the unease of the nights, and partly to avoid the temptation. I still felt drawn to that place. I felt the need to know its secrets. Eventually, hoping to avoid it entirely, I sought a new position. I can't even remember where it was now. I had only a couple of weeks remaining before my final day. But I had one final task. I prepared myself for the journey. Extra light sources, some matches, spare batteries, charging packs, a basic first aid kit, and supplies of food and drink. I knew communications would not work deep underground, so I was cautious. My journey was ill-advised. I understand that. I knew it then, and I am sorry. It might seem odd for me to express that to you, given the situation, but I do feel the need to. I returned to the entrance. I went down the stairs, now with determination. Knowing there was an endpoint made it easier. I eventually arrived at the elevator. It was waiting for me, and I used the key and entered. I inserted the key inside and paused. A wave of doubt washed over me. Perhaps a part of me knew what was to come. Or maybe it's merely hindsight. Then I pressed the button. The elevator began its descent. It was slow, torturously slow. I became anxious. Was it even moving? There was no floor indicator, nothing to tell what the elevator was doing. I realized there was no distress button either. No way to call for assistance if I was stuck. Just up and down. Fear set in, but I tried my best to stay calm. After an extended period, I decided to go back up. I had had enough of this little journey into darkness. I tried the up button, but as before, it did nothing. Apparently, this elevator was only meant to go down. Panic surged. I was trapped in a moving chamber, and I had no idea where it was headed. I told myself to remain calm and that it had to stop eventually. The supplies I had brought were some comfort. It's amazing what a difference it can make, when faced with the unknown, to have bottled water on hand. The slow descent continued. Minutes blended into what might have been an hour. The lift rocked gently, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. I started thinking about where I had worked, the structure, and the various things it contained, but I knew nothing about what could be so far below the building. It made no logical sense for the depth to be so extreme. It had to be ancient. It was like going back to a time before the current shops and amenities even existed. Then, without warning, the lift slowed to a complete stop. It was silent. Had it malfunctioned? My initial thought was that I was now trapped. But then I remembered why I was there, to discover what lay beneath the surface. I tried the lift control key, and it worked. The doors opened with a metallic groan. The space I now looked upon was vast. It was a cavern, not enclosed like a level of a building. It was far too wide, extending into the distance, lit with a gentle, pervasive, sickening, yellow-green light. I've tried describing it, but it defies description. The walls were not smooth concrete, but natural stone. Huge pillars rose and disappeared into the gloom. It was not dark as I expected, but not light like above ground. A low, steady hum echoed. The air was still, but had a slight coolness. The whole place seemed weirdly alive. I stepped out of the elevator, feeling like an explorer in an alien world. The extent of the area was stunning. I could see a few structures in the distance. Small shops, but older than anything above. They were lit, which I had not expected. The light gave off no heat, which made me believe they were not electrical. They simply glowed from within. There were no other sounds, no voices or machines. I was completely alone here. I walked toward the nearest structure. It was a market stall of sorts with goods on display. The items were strange, things I had never seen before, and I can tell I will not be able to describe them well. They were made from unusual materials. Not wood, not metal, not stone, but something else. A smooth, matte substance. Some items were odd shapes, and some items were clear. Some almost fluid. Other items appeared to be solid, but refracted light with a strange aura. Their purpose was unknown to me. I touched one gently. It felt warm and seemed to have a pulse. Was this the merchandise? If it was, who were the customers? As I looked around, I became aware of the layout of the place. It was huge. Stalls and shops extended in all directions. Some were closer than others. There was a sort of pathway between them, but unlike above, the arrangement was not orderly. It was chaotic and sprawling. It seemed to go on forever. As I ventured further, I encountered more and more. I began to see signs of occupation, a strange workbench, tools that were unrecognizable, and small seating areas, yet there were no people. I felt alone, but not fully alone. It was as if something was watching me. I could feel it. I made it a point to go down every lane, every corridor. Every space I encountered seemed to lead to more spaces, with no end. Hours went by, and I barely kept track of the time. The items on display at the stalls were bizarre and unusual. I could not recognize what any of it meant. It had to be a marketplace of some kind, a mirror image of the mall above, with things for purchase. Who traded here? Who were these people that visited this mall? I was starting to get tired and hungry. I realized I hadn't eaten anything, and I was using up the batteries of my flashlight. At one of the stalls, a table with seating was unoccupied, so I took a moment to sit down. I opened my supplies and ate some food. I can honestly say it was the most surreal dining experience of my life. Here, surrounded by countless stalls of objects beyond my understanding, deep beneath the surface of the earth, in a mirror image netherrealm mall. It was isolating and awe-inspiring at the same time. I finished eating and gathered my things. There was still so much to see, so much I didn't comprehend. I stood up and began to explore again, choosing a different direction. The maze of stalls and pathways continued endlessly. Each display was stranger than the last. I saw items that looked like living plants but were clearly mechanical. Others appeared to be solidified light. I could not find a single item that I recognized. It was as if I stumbled into a mall from another time or another world. As I moved deeper, I noticed some of these stores seemed to have closed down. The lights within them were dim or flickered. A few were completely dark. It gave the area an abandoned air, but also a feeling that it was still in operation, just winding down. I started to wonder if the activity happened at specific times I was missing. Perhaps the vendors and customers appeared only under certain conditions. I found myself in an area where the pathways narrowed again. The ceiling seemed lower and the air felt heavier. I could hear a faint dripping sound like water, but there was no sign of moisture anywhere. The hum that had been present throughout the cavern grew slightly louder. It vibrated in the air, and I could feel it in my chest. It made me uneasy. The further I went, the more I felt like an intruder. It was as if I had crossed a boundary of some sort, gone somewhere I was not meant to be. It was not a rational feeling, but a deep-seated instinct. I stopped for a moment and considered turning back. My curiosity was intense, but so was the feeling of unease. However, as I hesitated, I saw something that made me continue on. At the end of a particularly narrow passage, there was a larger space, and in the center of that space was something I could just barely make out. It looked like a table, but larger and more ornate. It was covered in carvings and symbols, and it glowed faintly from within. I moved closer, intrigued. The carvings were unlike anything I had ever seen, but they had a sense of purpose, as if they told a story. As I examined them, I realized they seemed to shift slightly, as if the patterns were not fixed, but flowing. The glow from the table intensified, and the hum grew stronger. Then I noticed something else. Around the table, there were markings on the floor. They were faint, barely perceptible, but they formed a circle, and within this circle were strange symbols. It looked like some kind of ritual space. My unease grew exponentially. I had a distinct feeling I was witnessing something ancient, something powerful. I looked up from the table to see lights in the distant far side of the cavern, and a feeling came over me that this place was not empty. I could not see anyone, but a different light flickered. A light I had not noticed before. I decided it was time to leave. This place was not for me. It was too strange, too unknowable. The atmosphere was oppressive, and I was starting to feel lightheaded. I turned around and began to retrace my steps, moving quickly now. I wanted to get back to the lift, to get out of this place. The feeling of being watched was intense. It felt like unseen eyes were following my every move. I took a wrong turn somewhere in the maze of stalls and found myself in an area I hadn't seen before. Here it was darker, and the shops seemed to be totally abandoned. The items on display were broken or damaged, and there was a sense of decay. It was as if I had stumbled into a forgotten part of the marketplace, a place where things were discarded and left to rot. It was as if I was in some ruins, and a deep, dark feeling crept into me. Then I heard a sound. It was a soft, scraping sound coming from one of the darker stalls. I froze, listening intently. The sound came again, and this time I could tell it was moving closer. Fear gripped me, but my curiosity made me want to know what was happening. I shone my flashlight towards it. The beam revealed nothing but shadows. Then I saw them. I did see them. Forms. Moving. They did not make a sound, but they were not still. I couldn't quite make out what they were doing. But it was then that I realized I must leave this place, and I must leave now. I ran as fast as I could, back through the maze of stalls and pathways. I didn't care about getting lost anymore. I just needed to get back to the elevator. The scraping sound seemed to follow me, but I didn't look back. I just kept running, my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, in the distance, the familiar shape of the elevator. I ran to it, inserted the key, and the doors opened with a groan. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the upward journey. The doors closed, and the lift began to move. The slow ascent felt like an eternity. I was terrified that the beings who were chasing me were going to stop the elevator. Hours passed, but I was relieved. When the doors finally opened at the top, I didn't hesitate. I bolted up the concrete stairs, emerging back into the familiar, mundane world above. I locked the door to the stairwell, and I did not look back. I hurried out of the place, just running, wanting to move faster. I swear I will never go back. The experience has left me shaken. I cannot forget what I saw. The strange items I encountered, and those forms that were chasing me. What was that place? Who were those beings? What was the purpose of that endless underground mall? I will probably never know the answers. In the end, it's better that way. Some things are best left unknown. Some doors are meant to stay closed. This place, this entire world, is so much bigger and older and stranger than anyone can imagine. It hides things we cannot understand, and I fear there are things that hide from us. Since that night, I've been haunted by what I witnessed. Every shadow seems to hold something more. Every creak of the house, every distant noise makes me jump. I've tried to explain it to others, but their reactions range from disbelief to concern for my sanity. They think I imagined it, or that stress has gotten to me. Sometimes, I almost believe them. Almost. But I know what I saw. I know the depth of that place, the bizarre objects, the unnerving feeling of being watched, and those ancient forms that move in shadows. I cannot shake the memory of their stillness, their silent observation. It was not a hostility I sensed from them, but something far more unsettling. An indifference. An ancient knowing that dwarfed my understanding. I left my job as a security guard, of course. I couldn't stay in a place that held such a secret, such a gateway to the unknown. I moved far away to a town where nothing extraordinary ever seems to happen. I hoped that distance would bring peace, but it hasn't. The image of that underground marketplace, the memory of its strange light, and the low hum, it's always there, lurking at the edge of my thoughts. I spend my days trying to live a normal life, trying to forget. But I write these words as a record, a testament. If anything ever happens to me, if I disappear, I want someone to know. I want someone to understand that there are depths to this world we cannot fathom, that there are realities beyond our comprehension. I no longer seek answers. I no longer want to know what lies beneath. I only wish I had never opened that door, never gone down those steps. The knowledge I gained has come at too high a price. Ignorance, in this case, was truly bliss. And so this letter is my warning, a desperate plea. If you ever find yourself facing a similar situation, an unusual door, a forgotten key, a descent into darkness, turn back. Walk away. Let the mystery remain a mystery. Some truths are too much for the human mind to bear. Our journey ends here, for now. But remember, every shadow has secrets, and deeper mysteries await. Subscribe to remain tethered to this twilight realm. Kindle the like button, a flame held bravely against the encroaching dark. And toll the bell of notification so you're ready when Psycho Adam Reads returns next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Until then, linger at the edge of twilight. Remain ever watchful and listen closely, because sooner or later, all whispers guide you back to Psycho Adam Reads. And have a very mustache day.